Hello, my name's Louise Savage, and welcome to the very first edition, broadcast, I don't know, of my brand new YouTube channel called Louise Savage Muses. I'm going to be hopefully focusing on books. As you can see, I'm sat here in my little library at home. Mainly, that'll be my focus, but also muses because I am very, very fascinated by the classical world, the ancient Greeks and Romans. I did many years ago study classics at uni. So I'm hoping to maybe do something around that. Without further ado, I think I'd like to start by talking to you about my first book on my shelf. And this is a book that I read very, very recently. And it was fascinating because it wouldn't normally be the sort of book that I think I would enjoy. There were lots of elements of it that I found horrifying, shocking, terrifying. It was almost, by the ending, and I don't mean this in a derogatory way, but it was sort of Hammer House of Horror almost by the end. And yet I still loved it. I read it long enough ago for me to have sort of settled it in my head. So I know that it's a book that's going to stay with me because I keep thinking about the characters and the sort of themes and ideas that I encountered in the novel. Anyway. So the book is Sayaka Murata's Earthlings. This copy was sent to me by Granta, the publisher, very, very early on, before it was released. And I feel really guilty because I've only just recently got round to reading it. I think I felt the title misled me a bit. I thought it was going to be a sci-fi novel of some sort, which in some ways it is because there is a reference to another planet, but it's an imaginary planet. So the novel focuses around a young girl called Natsuki, and she has a very difficult relationship with her immediate family, her mother, her father, and her sister. The sister seems to be a real favourite, and Natsuki seems to be left out, really. Doesn't fit in, doesn't feel she fits in, gets a lot of discipline, in inverted commas, from her mother particularly. So the novel starts with them driving off into the hillside, the countryside, to see their grandparents, and all the family are gathering there. It's obviously an annual event. Natsuki's really looking forward to seeing her cousin, male cousin, and he's an interesting character too. And the novel revolves largely around the relationship between her and her cousin and the impact of that. It's a rites of passage novel in many ways, but also it focuses on things like sibling rivalry. Natsuki experiences some terrible abuse at the hands of one of her teachers. She struggles to be believed. And I just loved the characterization. The reference to Earthlings is to do with the fact that there's a planet in the novel, which the young children imagine, called Popinopinop. I can't say it. Something like Popinopia or Popinopinaya. Somebody will hopefully let me know how it's spelt. And that's kind of a place of escape for the children. So by the end of the novel, as I say, it's really visceral, really gruesome. It goes way beyond, in my mind, the realms of realism, but somehow the way it's written is so powerful that it's plausible. And it's a real comment, I suspect, on Japanese society, although I don't know that for sure because I don't know enough about it. I would be fibbing if I was to claim that was something that I knew a lot about. Anyway, I wholeheartedly recommend it as something rather different, especially around about Halloween, this time of year. It might, if you're a fan of horror or something like that, it might fit in quite nicely with your Halloween reading. It might be a bit too late by the time I release this. I don't know, because all of this is new to me. Anyway, there's my first book recommendation. And yeah, let's see what else I've got on my shelf, shall we? My next choice couldn't be more different, really, from Earthlings. I think it's a novel that would be very appropriate for any lover of historical fiction, which I am. I absolutely adore historical fiction. But it's so much more than that. I absolutely adore this author. So I'm talking about The Mercies by Kieran Millwood Hargreave. I find it so stunning that somebody so young can create, and I don't mean that in a patronising way, but this novel is so rich and so beautiful, as is all of Kieran's writing that I've read. Not read everything yet. I'm spinning it out. Like, I don't know whether you do that. I like to spin out novels. So if I come across a novelist I really like, I don't read all the novels in one go. I sort of spread them out like sweets or treats or whatever it might be. And I certainly feel like that about Kieran's novels. But anyway, this one, The Mercies, it starts with the most dramatic storm, and it takes place in a place called Finnmark in 1617. It's not fictional, it's based on a true story, as my understanding. And Maren, who's this young woman living in this very sort of small, tight-knit community, watches this storm happening, and her father and her brother are both on board a fishing vessel, as are all the men of the community, because they're so desperate for food. It's a very harsh lifestyle that they have. And the boat disappears. So you now have a community that is solely built of women. So interesting things happen. And it's all about how the sort of power devolves amongst those women, how their relationships change because of the absence of men. But into all of this eventually appears a man of the church with his new wife, Ursa. And Ursa and Maren form quite an unlikely friendship. And there's some fantastic twists and turns as a result. Of course, the church don't approve of this community. The Kirke don't approve of this community that's based on female assertiveness and power, if that's how you view it, excuse me. So it's dramatic and fascinating and rich. There are so many elements to it. So, for example, Maren's mother, the way that she copes with or doesn't cope with the loss of her husband and the pressure that puts on Maren, the way that some women in the community are less conventional than others, and how that's dealt with once the men are absent. So fantastic novel. I can't rave about it enough. Beautiful cover too. Very, very sort of quite a contrast, really, the cover in many ways to the sort of starkness of the storytelling. The settings in it are fabulous. It's one of those novels where you can picture everything. So one of the rooms, well, several of the rooms actually, there are 3 rooms in 3 different buildings at least in this novel that I can still picture intimately in my head. I feel as though I've visited those rooms. It's also about how women are treated by the church. So if you enjoyed something like The Crucible, the play by Arthur Miller, that the feeling that you get when you watch that play or read it is very similar to the feeling that you get when you read this novel. So there you go. That's The Mercies, Kieran Millwood Hargreave. I always want to call her Millman Hargreave. I don't know why. Sorry, Kieran. But I think it's an absolutely superb novel. Really, really enjoyed it very, very much. Deep joy. final novel that I've chosen to talk about is a novel that came out 2 years ago, maybe. Won the Booker Prize, there's a clue. The year that it was shared, very controversially. So, and I had really, really looked forward to reading this novel. Of course, it's Margaret Atwood's The Testaments. Many, many years ago, probably 30 odd years ago, I read The Handmaid's Tale and absolutely loved it. Although it wasn't by any means my favourite of Margaret Atwood's novels. My favourite is probably The Robber Bride or The Blind Assassin. So, you know, it's all about taste, isn't it? But they're the ones that really stick out in my mind. I'm a massive Margaret Atwood fan. So I was very much looking forward to this novel being published and getting my hands on a copy. But I didn't want to read it until I'd revisited The Handmaid's Tale. I decided not to reread the novel. Instead, I watched the very popular TV series with Elizabeth Moss et al., which I did enjoy. It's so dark, very, very challenging watch. But I stopped at the point that the original novel stopped and then picked up The Testaments and read it. I have to say, I absolutely loved the take on Aunt Lydia. The fact that she gets a voice in the novel is fabulous. And I love the way that she's slightly reinterpreted as far as the reader's concerned. I'm not convinced that's necessarily reinterpreted as far as Margaret Atwood is concerned. So it was great to sort of get an insight into her character and motivations. I also like the way it focused on characters from the next generation of women as well. So you've got 3 different voices here in this narrative, and I'm somebody who enjoys novels that work like that. I know it's become increasingly popular way to structure a novel, and I do find it interesting. I was slightly disappointed by it, if I'm going to be absolutely honest. I know I'll upset Atwood fans out there. Sometimes I found the writing a little bit, I don't know, just not as polished and wry as I'd normally expect of Atwood. At times, almost a little bit chiclety. That's not quite right, but there was something about it that jarred on me a little bit. However, I'm really, really glad I've read it. I don't think I would have resisted reading it anyway. So, and also there's the fascination. You're trying to interpret who some of the voices are. So as you're reading it, you're trying to check that you've got it right, and you've worked it out. And I love novels that do that too. So I wouldn't have missed it for the world, but there was something slightly anticlimactic about it, especially because it won the Booker Prize. So a little bit contentious, but I don't want to be dishonest. I still thoroughly recommend it. So they're my 3 recommendations for my very first book vlog, tube, twerp, not sure. Anyway, that's what I'm recommending, and hoping that some of you will pick up those novels, or if you have read them, I'd love to know what you think of them, whether you agree or disagree. I'd love a little bit of a debate about it. That would also be fabulous. So yeah, there we go. Over and out. Take care. Bye.